Hi, my name is Yvonne Ortiz. I'm a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I'm going to read to you from two books by the same author. The first one's called Little Leaders, Bold Women in Black History by Vashti Harrison. And the other is called Little Legends, Exceptional Men in Black History by Vashti Harrison as well. But first, before I read to you some of the stories out of both books, I'm going to tell you a little bit about why Vashti Harrison made these books. This book grew out of a project I began during Black History Month. It started as a drawing challenge to myself to illustrate one African American woman from history every day for the month of February and post the finished image to social media with a brief summary of the women's accomplishments. As I researched and read amazing stories of women, both known and unknown, I was surprised to be moved so deeply. As a Black woman, I have studied the history of my people, but never had I felt this connected to the beauty and passion behind their boldness. Whether they were fighting for their families or for social justice, or daring to become an artist or an astronaut, each one of these women broke barriers for those who came before her. In a society where being Black and female meant being an outsider or sometimes invisible, these women dared to go after what they wanted and to demand what they deserved. Some of them were reluctant leaders, while others were not even conscious of their bravery, but their legacies live on to pave the way for more of us to follow. Many of them didn't set out to be pioneers, but all of them were, and we can look to each one of them for inspiration. I wanted to tell all their stories together to celebrate not only their collective contribution to history, but also their diversity. Some of them you'll recognize, such as Harriet Tubman and Rosa Parks, but you'll also meet less famous figures, such as Alice Ball and Mary Bowser. You'll meet scientists, politicians, doctors, painters, sculptors, and dancers. And they were all Black women. This in no way means that the book is only for Black girls. I hope readers of every background find these stories compelling and inspiring. But I did create it with them and my younger self in mind. I think about what kinds of dreams I might have had if I had known about all these women when I was growing up. If I'd known that so many people who look like me had done incredible things. To be able to see yourself in someone else's story can be life-changing. To know that a goal is achievable can be empowering. And I hope that anyone who reads these biographies, whether or not they look like these little leaders, is inspired to go after the things they are passionate about. This collection offers only a handful of the countless bold Black women who have done extraordinary things and lived incredible lives. But she hopes to spark this interest and encourage you to find out more about them and the women who have followed in their footsteps. So the first woman I want to tell you about is Angela Yvonne Davis. And yes, she and I share the name Yvonne, and I'm very excited about that. That's actually what she looks like in the afro. She was born in 1944, and she was an activist, or is an activist and a scholar. Angela grew up in racially segregated Birmingham, Alabama, a city at the center of the fight for civil rights. By the time she was a teenager, Angela was already actively involved in the movement. She organized interracial study groups, which were broken up by the police. This was only the beginning for Angela's passion for activism and scholarship. In college, she majored in philosophy and was a student under a famous German thinker named Herbert Marcuse. She says he taught her that she could be an academic and a scholar, as well as an activist and a revolutionary. Angela was outspoken and a prominent counterculture voice. She became affiliated with the Black Panther Party, as well as a member of and later president of the Communist Party USA. Both groups were considered dangerous because of their opposition to the US government, so she was put on the FBI's most wanted list. Some of her major passions were fighting for prison reform and against police brutality. She was labeled a troublemaker for fighting the system. She was let go from her teaching job at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, but she fired back with a lawsuit. She was put in prison for conspiracy charges, but was acquitted 16 months later. Angela Davis is largely considered a symbol for fighting back against systems of oppression. And through all of this, she maintained a devotion to teaching, and she remains a professor of philosophy right now. I want to also show you a picture of Angela Davis with the late Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison and Angela Davis were friends. And one of the reasons why I want to show you this picture is to remind you that queens collaborate. They don't compete with each other. They were good friends, and they were also members of two different sororities, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. That's what queens do. We support each other. The other woman I want to tell you about is Dr. Mae Jameson. She was born in 1956. She is an engineer, a physician, and an astronaut. And this is actually a picture of Dr. Jameson. You may have seen her before. As a child, Mae loved to read, especially books about science and astronomy. By the time she was in kindergarten, she knew she wanted to be a scientist. This, however, did not keep her from other passions. Mae also wanted to be a dancer, and throughout her youth, she studied every type of dance. In college in the 1970s, Mae double majored in chemical engineering and African American studies. When she learned about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., she saw his work as a call to action to help people. So after graduating, she decided to become a doctor. She joined the Peace Corps in 1983 and traveled to West Africa on a 2-year program to provide medical assistance to those in need. After returning, she saw major changes taking place at NASA. In 1983, for example, Sally Ride became the first American woman in space. Mae had always imagined herself in space, but was hesitant to pursue that dream. But it was in seeing the actress Nichelle Nichols play Lieutenant Uhura in the TV show Star Trek that finally inspired Mae to apply to the space program. In 1987, Mae became the first Black woman in the astronaut training program. And a few years later, she flew into orbit as the first African-American woman in space. Mae still wanted to have a direct impact on people, so she left NASA in 1993 and created her own company, the Jameson Group, which researches ways technology can help people in their daily lives. She also started the Dorothy Jameson Foundation for Excellence, which in 1994 launched The Earth We Share, a science camp for children. Now I'm going to read to you 2 excerpts from Little Legends, Exceptional Men in Black History. And the first person I want to show you and tell you about is someone named that you may have never heard of, and his name is Arthuro Schomburg. Arthuro Schomburg was born in 1974, and he died in 1938. And he is one of my biggest heroes. He was a historian, and he's Puerto Rican like me. When Arturo was growing up in Puerto Rico, he asked his teacher why there weren't any Black people in their history books. She told him it was because Black people had no history. Even though he was just a kid, Arturo knew this could not be true. He dedicated his life to searching for, collecting, and preserving the stories of Africans around the world. Arturo began to research on his own, finding stories of people like poet Phyllis Wheatley and inventor Benjamin Banneker. Arturo was amazed by the Black man who built the first clock in America. Why were there no monuments to him, he wondered. This was the beginning of his quest to find more stories of Black heritage. In 1891, Arturo moved to New York City, where he worked as a law clerk. His main job was to index and organize paperwork, skills that would soon come in handy. In the United States, he was able to pursue his new passion of rare book hunting. The books he was looking for, written about or by Black people, were often really inexpensive. Arturo saw them for what they were, treasures. Soon his collection grew into a library so big that there was no space left in Arturo's house. And in 1926, he sold the entire collection to the New York Public Library for $10,000. Its new home was on the 135th Street branch in Harlem. He used the money to travel to Europe, where he was thrilled to look for art featuring Black people. Arturo dedicated his life to preserving his people's culture, campaigning for Puerto Rican liberation, and advocating for Black history courses to be included in the U.S. educational system. In 1972, the New York Public Library transferred his collection to a facility that would eventually become the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. Arturo turned a simple question into a hobby, which grew into a passion, which transformed the way we document cultural history in America. Without his curiosity and excitement, so much history may have been lost to the world forever. Here is a picture of Arthur Schomburg, or Arturo Schomburg, as he was called. And one of the reasons why I'm showing you his picture is because I want you to understand not to let anybody question your Blackness and who gets to be Black. Because I mentioned he's from Puerto Rico and he's still Black. The last person I want to share with you is Dr. Charles R. Drew. He was born in 1904 and he died in 1950, and he was a famous surgeon. Although he was a bright student, Charles didn't have perfect grades or always know exactly what he wanted to do. Two experiences got him interested in medicine: an injury on the football field and his sister's tuberculosis. Afterward, he became passionate about medicine and understanding how the body worked. He went to Montreal to study at the McGill University Faculty of Medicine. The Canadian school had a better reputation than most of the United States for its treatment of minority students. He graduated second in his class of 137 students. During his surgical residency, working with bacteriologist John Beatty, Charles became interested in transfusion in medicine, the transference of blood and blood products. Charles became interested in transfusion medicine, the transfusion of blood and products, and through that research found that if you separate the blood from the plasma, the liquid portion of the blood without the blood cells, it could last much longer, making it possible for blood to be stored. So now it could be preserved and shipped overseas, even taken out into the battlefield. In 1940, after Britain was attacked by Nazi Germany, Charles was asked to lead a special medical effort called Blood for Britain. Months before the United States entered World War II, Charles became the assistant director of a new national blood banking system for the American Red Cross. They collected more than 10,000 pints of blood for the war effort. The military, however, decreed that blood taken from African American donors had to be segregated from whites' blood and couldn't be transfused with them. Blood has no racial characteristics. So Charles knew this was wrong, both scientifically and morally. He spoke up, and in 1941, he resigned from his job. He returned to his former employer, Howard University, and became the chief of surgery at its Freedmen's Hospital. He spent the next 9 years mentoring students and advocating for the education and inclusion of African Americans in medicine. Charles' discoveries were responsible for countless lives being saved and transformed in the medical field forever. He was a pioneer who took a stand for what's right. Thanks so much. Take care.